Welcome to all you Contras, preppers, and just fundamentally people interested in comms tonight specifically. I have my good friend and guest historian on tonight, and I am going to forego the list of upcoming classes because I'm doing that on the podcast that's coming out either right before this or right after this. It'll probably be right after this. But I'm here to talk about the class that I'm going to soon with historian, and we're going to be diving into a couple subjects that I know Brushbeater has touched on, plus probably some more because I've got some questions and I need some answers tonight from nonsense I've seen online. So historian, say hello and just give a little brief of what you're doing and when your class is.
Greetings. This is historian. And I'm going to be teaching the high-frequency near-vertical incident skywave class at Brushbeater in North Carolina. And that will be D-Day weekend, which I believe is June 4th, 5th, and 6th. And we will be working from, formal class time will be from 9 to 5 those 3 days. We're going to have some I guess you would call them optional or bonus sessions, where we'll go over a lot of the material that we've covered in class, and you'll get even more hands-on experience with some of the concepts that we'll be talking about. And then we'll finish with a field exercise on Sunday where we take the antenna that we're going to build. Every student will be building their own antenna and deploying to the field and testing out both the techniques, the antenna, and the equipment that students have either built during the class or brought with them. We're not going to be building radios in this class, but that may be something we'd cover down the road. Anyway, that's pretty much what I've got coming up. And that's going to be, again, June 4th, 5th, and 6th of, the first full weekend in June and the Friday before.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's always a lot of work, but it's almost always an enormous amount of fun for me to teach it.
And you're doing the 5th, 6th, and 7th. It's the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Is that correct?
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm taking the 4th off just to get there. Sorry.
Same. No, I'm doing the same thing. So
5th, 6th, and 7th. Then yes.
It took me a moment. I was like, wait a minute. Is that I'll be there as well? I'll be assisting who I can when I can. I need to again brush up on getting the radios. If you come up to the course, it's definitely going to be right up the road from Brushbeater's store. I know he last time had some radios on hand. And we've talked about the G90 before. We've talked about the 6100. There's the 6200 option. And if you spend any time in the end of the day, I will try to get your radio, if I'm smart enough, unlocked so you have full band capacity as well. I can't always say it's possible. Last time it took Mrs. Brushbeater to be there to assist with some of the software end of things, but we did get it done for most of the people coming. If not, I will direct you towards links where you can do it yourself. And the G90 is extremely easy. It's literally pop over the panel. There's an arrow pointed to it, and you just take a little diode out, and that thing's open to the wind too. I know, historian, you have a G90, correct? We've talked about this a little bit.
Yeah, I bought the G90, and I bought it from the Brushbeater store. Their prices were competitive, and their customer service is excellent. I have not had any problems with mine. I really like that radio. For the price, the capability that comes with it is really remarkable. I was very pleasantly surprised by how capable that little radio is. Now, it's an HF-only radio, so you're not going to get DC to daylight as you will with some of the other more expensive radios out there. But if you're primarily interested in HF operation, it's a good alternate. And I'll be bringing mine along with some other radios that folks will have a chance to take a look at. And we're going to be talking at least a little bit about radios. But on the subject of radios, I'm going to say this. You need to have a radio in order to do radio communication. You don't need a great radio. And what really defines your station and your capability, your technical capability, is not so much the radio, but the antenna. A good antenna, properly deployed, makes all the difference. And with commercial antennas getting more and more expensive, you probably will just about cover the cost of the class by the antenna that we're going to build. And what we're going to be building is a dipole variant that is specifically designed and engineered for portable operation for the lower HF bands. And we get into that in class. But not only do you walk away with the antenna, you walk away with having developed some skills to build and maintain it. So if you need another one, you'll know how to do it.
Yeah, and that's something, like, one of the big things that I want to stress on this. I am obviously my podcast is about gear, about going to classes and everything else. That's what we've been doing. That's what Rabbit gets into. That's what Wisco Mando talks about, X, all the other stuff. We stay off the politics to an extent just because I know it's not my field, and gear nerdage is a real thing. I just took another class and I'm like looking at shot time clocks and everything else now. But there's
can't measure your splits. If you can't measure your splits, you don't know how well you're doing.
If you don't know how fast from draw you are, you don't know how long it's going to take you to get that weapon out. And it's something I've dodged for a while. There's always stuff that I dodge because of price or this, or I don't know what I'm doing. And I'll admit right now, back when I got into radios, didn't have the fascination in antennas until I took Scouts class. I knew what they were. I knew how they worked. I knew the general processes that most people do. And if you take Scouts RTO course, you'll figure out how to build various antennas. When I got to HF, I stalled out again. I'll admit right now I'm a general still because I'm lazy. I have all the study materials. I've started studying for the AE, and I always get partway through and I get bored with the stuff, because if you don't do it on a regular basis, a lot of the AE course test questions are, I guess, not applicable to the one of the common shooter at the range. If you could just go to the range and you're just doing limited stuff, you're just doing HF basics, a lot of the questions are important, but a lot of it's kind of nuanced stuff. And that comes back to the antenna stuff. How many antennas did I want to buy? How much money did I want to spend? Well, when I started out, I bought, I think, a 20 and a 40, and that's just standard dipole, and I spent $200. And this was a while ago. I had my general class for long enough to have to get my re-up, so over 10 years. And they were great antennas, but they weren't anything special. They were copper wire with a split and I think a balun on it. But they did one band for $100. Right now, if you come to the class, you're going to be able to do multiple bands with this thing. It's going to work. It's going to be super, super durable. A historian does not build anything cheaply. He doesn't build anything that is what I call lightweight. And I'll caveat that in a second. But you'll come away with probably an investment both in knowledge and in your capabilities. I don't buy antennas anymore. I just don't. I may buy one eventually if I want something for satellites, specifically receive specific things, just because of I think the helical nature of them. Could I build one? Yeah, sure, but I may waste the money on one of those things. Other than that, you can build all this stuff at home. It takes know-how, it takes intelligence, not a whole lot, and it takes the ability to solder, and that's something you'll get in this class, bar none.
Yeah,
So,
we cover soldering techniques. We cover wire stripping techniques, and some of these things, you think, wow, I've got a wire stripper. Why do I need wire stripping techniques? Well, it's one thing if you're going to strip half an inch off the end of a piece of wire to make an electrical connection. And it's another thing if you're having to strip 4 or 6 inches off a piece of insulated wire to make an antenna connection without nicks, without, cutting the strands. There's an art to it, and I'll show you how to do that, and we'll get a chance to practice it extensively. So, that's one of the things that we do in the class. That's on Saturday when we get into antenna banking. we talk about the theory, and then we talk about the practice, and then we practice, and then we go out and start building antennas.
Yeah,
So,
this is something that's also very important. Antennas are not perishable items, but I think of them as magazines sometimes, as well as a barrel for a weapon. The barrel's where your accuracy comes from, is your range, but also over time, because they're exposed to the environment so much, they do degrade. And maybe barrelware is a better or appropriate thing. So if you use it enough, it's outdoors enough, air down.
yeah, eventually you wear out your antenna. This one's going to take quite a while. It's built to last using materials that are intended to last, but nothing lasts forever. And if you know how to fix it or upgrade it, then you're going to be able to be, HF capable for a much longer period of time. And, it's probably not a bad idea to have a spare. So, you're going to build this one and you're going to know how to build another. And that's not a bad idea either. I try to have at least one backup for my portable antennas, HF antennas, so that if something happens, I can get back on the air quickly if I need to.
Yep, and that's happened to me out in the field. I've had to repair things in the field, and with modern technology now, you can carry a electric soldering gun out and do easy repairs out in the field just to get on the air. That said, I'm more, and this is something like Historian and I have chit chat about. I am a QRP guy. I don't have a 100-watt rig with me. It is at Rabbit's house where it's nice and secure, and he can use it more than I can. I was traveling. A 100-watt rig is not usually an easy thing to carry around. There are now options for that make it a lot easier, but I still, because I've gotten to that point, I run lighter stuff, and that equipment does get damaged faster than what Historian's going to make. And I guarantee you, if you come to class and you build his antenna, that thing will last. My father put up an antenna with bare copper wire that wasn't coated, and it lasted, I think, about 15 years. And it was still okay, but when I brought it down, it was starting to degrade, just how copper degrades over time. So if you think about that, you're going to get a good product out of just coming to the class, not learning anything else. And
that's get out of it is how to make antennas. Then you're going to
save thousands of dollars. Period.
Yes, you will.
And that's
certainly many hundreds, but yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I have antennas. I do buy HF, or not HF. I do buy UHF and VHF antennas because of the time factor.
Yep.
And, designing and building a directional beam antenna for UHF is not a trivial endeavor. Once I get above about, 70 centimeter handband, above about 500 megahertz, I pay the money and buy the commercial product, because even a difference of a 1/16 of an inch in an element length makes a big difference in how the antenna performs.
Yeah,
so
and
for those
applications,
stuff. Right, for those applications, I'll buy antennas. But, below that, low UHF, VHF, HF, medium frequency, those antennas, I make my own. I definitely am willing to make antennas for any amateur band from, 450 megahertz on down to 160 meters, or even, 600 meters or 2,000 meters. Those antennas are buildable without a great deal of experience. If you walk away from this class having learned how to strip wire and how to solder, you will be able to build any sort of antenna easily up to 2 meters without any problem at all.
Yeah. And a dipole and a 2 meters works just as well as your rubber ducky, if not better. There's also a whole, there's a whole bunch of, that's something that's touched in RTO class that Scout touches on deeply, polarization of antennas and stuff like that. So that changes when you hit HF, and that's part of the reason why the NVIS course is important for a lot of people. We've talked about NVIS before, and we've talked about like what the importance of it is, but we really it's hard to explain to a prepper why NVIS. And it bothers me to no end to know that most preppers stop at VHF, UHF, GMRS frequencies, and even CB. They'll stop at CB. And as I've traveled across the country, I've seen different areas have a different predominant use. They'll either be running GMRS or they'll be running CB, along with the hams that are out there. But the HF crews are always shooting long range. And this is something that I feel we neglect in the ham radio space. And I'm going to say it right up. It's the FUDs that cause a lot of problems in the ham space, not only for the prepping community, but for the exploration of stuff, because we get so used to doing certain habits. Like you guys were talking on the other podcast about competitions and why they're useful and valid, and I agree with it, but it also ends up sometimes stifling people because everybody's looking to get the most range at the most distance with sometimes the least amount of power, which is, I think, is a good thing. Or they'll throw 1,000 watts, or was it 1,000 watts PEP now?
1,500.
1,500, and they'll just try to drown everyone out for this stuff, and they'll miss very important stuff that used to be very important from the past, like NVIS, talking to your community with HF within a couple 100 miles, and that gets ignored now.
Well, in some respects it does. There are nets out there that meet, on a regular basis on HF, and there are NVIS nets. They're intended to cover, out to maybe 300 to 500 miles. And, you can listen to these nets. They're very common on weekend evenings or not weekends, but the weekday evenings. You can hear them, and often early in the morning during weekdays, and definitely on the weekends, often morning and evening, and sometimes midday as well. So, it's not a dead art, but it definitely is not as popular. And part of the reason,
it's definitely not as popular
as it used to be. And part of the reason for that is that it used to be when you started out as a novice, that you started out on HF, and you didn't get VHF privileges until you got your technician license or your general license. And so line of sight was not, the first radio that you got. I mean, when I was first licensed back in the 1970s, my first transmitter was a homebrew, crystal controlled CW transmitter. And that transmitter put out about 12 watts. And I worked all over the world with that, with 2 crystals and a radio receiver that I had built when I was younger. And I also made communications close by, a lot of them, on 40 and 80 meters. And that was not uncommon. So in the 1970s, you learned on HF. And I didn't get my first VHF radio until I think 7 or 8 years after I was first licensed. I got my novice, and then I got my general a year later, and I was interested in working, HF DX, foreign stations, mostly CW. And I spent, probably the first 7 or 8 years of my amateur career doing that. And I didn't get onto VHF until I'd been, active on HF for probably 7 or 8 years. These days, that's not the way it goes at all. You start out with a technician license. Very few technicians actually learn Morse code, although they have the same privileges.
I'm guilty of that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. CW is its place, but it's certainly not everything there is to do in amateur radio by an awfully long chalk. But, nowadays people get their technician license, and they usually get a handheld UHF, UHF radio, more or less expensive, and they get on the air and start talking to people using line of sight and very often local repeaters. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But you don't get the exposure to HF that you used to get as a novice many, many years ago. So I think that's part of the reason why people who want to rag chew will get on the local repeater and rag chew with the folks in their local area. And that makes a great deal of sense. I mean, it's inexpensive, easy tech, and all the rest of it. But if you want to expand your horizons a bit and go past, 40, 50, 60, 70 miles, HF covers that gap if you pick the right antenna, the right frequency, and the right time of day. And that's part of what we get into. And you can spend a great deal of time and get to know a lot of folks in your local area on HF, and possibly more than you would pick up on your local repeater. There are a lot more people within 300 or 400 miles of your station than there are within the coverage distance of a local repeater. Now, a networked repeater, that's a little bit different story, but
And here's the problem with the network repeaters and everything else. I'll counter that. I think the HF's a better option for a lot of people, and we miss it because when I started off, repeaters were open access to everybody, and they still technically are. But it got to the point that people were like, oh, well, because I got an handheld ICOM when I was in Georgia, because ICOM was running their D-Star, and all the networked repeaters were D-Star, and the local repeaters were D-Star. You could get on some of the normal local repeaters, and repeaters when I started out were at least $1,000 plus, and money was $1,000 was a lot more expensive than it is now.
$1,000 brought you a lot more then than it does now.
Yes, but you also probably didn't have $1,000 just laying around, and now people are running. It was more than just a paycheck. It was more than working at a fast food restaurant for a week or two, and all that started flowing away. People got D-Star, people got Fusion, I believe, and there's a couple other ones. The other one that's out now is the P25-ish. Oh, I'm going to say B-Tech radios. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
But I think it's P25
and I can't remember this encryption. My brain's shorting on me, but the radios have certain software to talk digitally, and it's all digital stuff. It's open source. If I go out and I want to listen to it, there is software to listen and communicate with these people. A lot of these companies said, hey, if you buy an ICOM, you have D-Star. If you buy a Yaesu, you do not have D-Star, you have Fusion. So a lot of areas were getting brand loyal. And I got to the point, I don't want to get on your repeater. I don't want to be stuck on a D-Star. I don't want to be stuck on a Fusion. And I've got Yaesu, I've got ICOM. I like the radios, and there's different balances to it. But you know what doesn't have that? HF. Now, HF has digital. You can run digital on there. But nobody really does. Everybody listens. And if you are doing digital on HF, you're probably in an area of the band, and you're listening for a specific digital. I think it's a lot more open.
Are you talking about digital voice, or are you talking about digital comms generally?
Digital comms in general, to be honest with you.
There's a lot of digital traffic out there.
There's a lot of digital traffic in HF, but if you're in the voice area, most of that's analog-based stuff that you can listen to.
Yeah, you're right. All the voice comms are voice comms. Digital voice, I don't know whether that's allowed on HF or not. I've never played with it.
I can't remember if it is or not, and that's a question I gotta do some research on it. But you don't have that barrier. I don't have to buy an ICOM. I don't have to go get this stuff to do it.
And I agree with that. Moreover, one of the other things you don't have to get is you don't have to have line of sight to a repeater to make HF work.
Yep, which also can be important when you have a storm and all your towers are down and the power is out.
Yeah, and I remember after the hurricanes down in Tennessee and North Carolina, listening to the Mount Mitchell repeater, and Scout and I talked about that. And there were people who, it took them days to weeks to be able to get far enough out of the, area in which they were living, a valley or what have you. It took them days before they could get out. And by that, I mean, get to a place where they could get line of sight on that Mount Mitchell repeater, which, is supposed to be an awesome repeater. And I listened to some of those folks during the aftermath of the hurricane. And, it was really people that were signed up for the Envis class that came shortly after that could not make it to class like 3 or 4 weeks after the hurricane because they had no way to get physical access to the outside world. And subsequently, I think we had 2 or 3 of them in class. And those folks, said, we really wish that we'd had a chance to take this class before that hurricane. So if you are interested in being able to communicate with other folks in emergencies, HF short skip or NVIS is definitely a very, very useful tool. And, as we comment, or as Guerrilla Logistician commented just a little bit ago, it's fun. You get into rag choosing conversations. Increasingly in the modern age, conversation seems to be a lost art.
It is. It really is.
Getting those skills too isn't a bad thing either. And apart from the radio communication aspect, getting into interesting conversations with folks is a good skill to have.
And having your ability to test your equipment and stuff like that too out in the field is important too. And that's something I think we don't do enough of. I've got to pull out all my gear before I come up and make sure everything's good to go and ready to go. And I've picked my radios prudently over time, other than the KX3, which is in my friend's hands, and he's getting to play with a little bit more. But
there's absolutely nothing wrong with the KX3. That is an awesome
There's
radio.
nothing wrong. Unless you're trying to play digital games and voice games, then it becomes tedious, but it is a great radio.
Yeah, the KX3, I've got one, and that is an awesome radio. It rivals the capability of the full-sized K3. It's an awesome radio in a relatively compact package, and you can get an optional outboard. You can
pan adapter for it. Yeah.
Pan adapter screen, whatever you want to call it,
which makes it a lot more capable, and it puts it in the confines of a lot of other radios that are on the market. To be fair, I really like the 6100. I think the G90 is a better, more durable entry level radio for a lot of stuff. But we also got to remember, like, the capabilities of a lot of these radios are still leaps and bounds above the cheap ones, or leaps and bounds above 20, 30 years ago too. And
even 10 years ago.
20 years ago. Yeah, I would say that, but definitely, yeah.
Even 10 years ago. I mean, for the bang for the buck out of the G90 is really amazing to me.
Yeah.
I mean,
and the only thing with the G90 that I have any issues with is if you're in a hot environment and you're trying to run digital, you need to drop that power down. If you were doing operational stuff, if you were in Ukraine, you'd be smart enough not to run it full bore all the time like a mesh-tastic node, because that'll get you killed. Well, but the radio can take it.
Transmitting continuously will get you killed in a non-permissive environment, regardless of what frequencies you're emitting, and it'll be damned quick. That's about the only good thing you can say about it.
Yeah, and they'll probably have to spend more on you than you did on your radio, but it still doesn't make good.
But there are all sorts of radio options, but the G90 is a very good one. A lot of bang for the buck. It's got a pan adapter. It is an SDR radio, so that when they have firmware upgrades and improve the operation of the radio, you can get those upgrades. And that's a plus. That's a real plus.
And they have.
Oh, yes.
You got to be careful with Zygo. I'll tell everyone straight up. Do not update for a week or so and then verify that everybody's having no problems with their updates, because sometimes they'll update and they'll try to sometimes brick off radios.
It'll be buggy.
So
yeah,
or it's buggy.
Yeah, what I do is make sure that I have the old version saved before I put a new update in.
Yep. And that's super important. It's something you want to keep as well. Two things on this. One, digital voice does exist in the HF. It is legal. I just picked up an ARRL thing by
Okay.
Kilo Charlie 9 Tango Charlie. They're using a mode called Free DV, and they are saying it's a narrower band than single sideband to communicate with. So
Well, that's
something
interesting.
interesting that I'll have to dig into.
Yeah, me too. No, I'm serious. I mean, one of the things
Oh,
you and I've talked about, I know, but I'll tell our listeners. I know a little bit about a lot of things, and I know a fair amount about some things, but I hesitate to ever call myself an expert
yeah.
because that kind of closes the door on learning.
Yep.
The way I look at this is there's always new stuff to learn and always more aspects of anything that I know about that I can learn more about. And one of my goals my entire life has always been to try to learn something new every day. And you just helped make this a good day. Thanks. Because now I've got something new to learn.
The reason why I brought this up too is the digital software out there, I know on the 6100, and I gave my G90 to a good friend who helped me out because he needed a radio. And I know it's durable. The last time I was at your class, we had a very tall pole land on a G90, and it took no damage. But the 6100 software has some cool features because people are developing software for these radios that are independent from the original Zygu company. And I can't remember the call sign, but it's like RC some number LB or something like that. If you get one, you can find it. And their software is better than Zygu software. So much so that when you get in the little groups on the Facebook groups and read and listen to the guys on it, they will talk about how much better it is in a lot of features. One of the features is the 6100s and 6200s do is they do RTTY and a couple other digital modes through the actual radio themselves. Plus, it decodes Morse, which is something that I think is very useful to people like me who just, for whatever reason, I just can't get a good handle on Morse. Probably because I don't use it enough. And I think if I did, I probably could. But it's nice to be able to see it being spelled out and listen to it at the same time. And that homemade software works even better. But there's, of course, FUDs who are like, well, you should just learn Morse. I agree with you, but maybe that guy wanted the good software so he could listen and learn at the same time.
Especially during contests.
Yep.
I used to be able to copy 30 to 35 words a minute back when I was active. Those can probably do 18 to 20 pretty reliably. But some of these folks are using computers to transmit contest exchanges, and they set the speed at 40 or 45 or 50 words a minute.
Yeah.
And I have trouble with that, so I use CW readers for contesting. And I know people that I respect greatly who, operate CW using computers. And I know a guy who got 160 meter DXCC CW, because most DX on 160 meters is CW. There's an increasing amount of JS8 call and other digital modes, but a lot of people are still using CW because it gets through. This particular gentleman, whose call sign I will not reveal, worked 130
To protect the guilty.
different countries on CW, and this guy cannot copy Morse code literally to save his life. He cannot do it. He wanted to do it.
Yep.
He tried for years to do it.
And I have too.
And could not do it. And I know people issues learning languages and learning Morse code. So, I've been around this hobby a long time, over 50 years. And I love CW. It's my preferred operating mode. But, if you can't if you have a problem copying Morse code for whatever reason, and you want to use a CW reader to help you out, or even to allow you to operate it, there's nothing wrong with that. Whether it's for fun or for contesting, or, in an emergency, if you know how to operate your computer software and get good downloads and decodes of the message, then it really doesn't matter whether you're using a computer that's in a box or the computer in your head. It doesn't make any difference.
Yep.
And CW is a very useful skill, especially if you're able to do that without a computer. It allows you the punch and the ability to get traffic through under marginal conditions without having to have a computer and digital programs and all the rest of that. So there's some advantage there. And if you can put that tool in your tool bag, it will stand you in good stead down the road.
Yeah, and if you can do it without a computer, you're better off, because there's a lot of simple, you can build your own key, just like you can build your own antenna, to the point that a lot of companies sell do-it-yourself, solder together little kits to make little Morse keys. That said, too, I think...
Get kind of snobby.
Say that again?
I said
No.
Something of a key snob. I learned on a straight key, and then I learned to run a bug, which is a semi-automatic keyer that's largely obsolete these days. And then I learned how to use iambic keyer paddles. And that's mostly what I use right now, but I still keep my hand in with a straight key. And I have to admit, a really well-engineered key, like one of the old World War II military J38s or any of those older, really high-quality keys, there really is a big difference once you start learning how to send manual Morse code. Having a good key makes a big difference. But
Oh, yeah.
that said, if budget's an issue, then yes, you can absolutely build your own key, and it will work.
Yep. It's not a heavy technical stuff. I do agree with you. I think I can't remember the company that makes the keys. I had one. I don't know if it exists anymore. I had a big steel base plate, chrome plated iambic one.
Talking about Vibraplex. I mean, a bunch of people.
Yep, it was a Vibraplex.
Yeah, a bunch of people make keys. Mike Marsh makes keys. Begali makes really awesome iambic keyers or paddles. I've got 3 or 4 Begalis, and they're not cheap, but they are extremely good. I mean, just so smooth. But yeah, the whole point of all this is that, yes, you have to have a radio. Doesn't need to be a good radio. You just need to have one that works and that covers the frequencies that you want to operate on, which in the case of NVIS is the lower HF bands and upper medium frequency bands. And by that, I mean 160 meters, 80 meters, 60 meters, 40 meters, 30 meters, maybe 10 megahertz. And those are pretty much, the HF medium frequency NVIS bands on the amateur frequencies. And, if you can operate on those bands, if you have good antennas, then you will be able to do NVIS even if you have, $100, 30-year used radio. The radio is not what makes the difference. What makes the difference is the antenna and the setup of the antenna.
Which is the more important thing, but that again comes into the play of why you go to the class, why you learn this stuff. You've recommended so many books to me, and I have purchased basically all of them, down to the fact that I just recommended Silicon Cyanide and London Calling in the North Pole to a Marine Corps comms guy, because apparently the military has gotten big into HF. Big. And I think we've talked about that before.
Yeah. And that's good that there are. And we've had some folks from various governmental agencies show up in class. And those guys, I think, have gotten a great deal out of what I had to teach. And that's a good thing. But to go back to touch on this, NVIS as a formal operating mode, at least for the United States, started in World War II, and for that matter, for the Germans as well, started in World War II. And Germany
Yep.
was using HF NVIS during the attacks on Russia and the retreat from Russia, because even though they had great UHF radios, line of sight radios, well, they had good HF radios too, but their armored columns and mobile effort pretty much all communicated with uh, upper HF and lower VHF line of sight radios. And once they got into the rugged terrain in Russia, it didn't work. So they ended up across 200, 300, 400 miles of distance using relatively low-powered 2 to 6 megahertz HF radios that were originally designed for infantry patrols. And later in the war, RCA was contacted by the War Department. They were concerned about maintaining reliable communications with the D-Day forces from command posts in England. And a chap, an RCA engineer named Harold Beveridge, ended up getting a commendation from General Eisenhower for suggesting and helping to set up the use of what we call NVIS, short skip HF, to keep the headquarters in contact with all the various operations that were going on in Normandy during D-Day and after D-Day.
Yep. It was used by the British too for the OSS. We could go down the list of
SOE,
users.
OS, well, not OSS would have been the United States.
SOE.
SOE.
Yep. SOE.
And MI6 and various and sundry other things. Yeah, the Brits had a...
Later was the OSS because they piggybacked on a lot of what the SOE built.
Yes, they did. Yeah, my father was in OSS during World War II, and I still have his J38 key that he got when he graduated from the OSS agent training course.
Wow. I have a very, very strong interest in the Sykes-Fairbank daggers, mostly because of that historical side. And the iterations past that. I like some of the newer ones better, but something about that knife just really tickles my inner tism of knives.
Yep. There's a lot to be said for a good knife. It doesn't run out of ammo. It doesn't jam, mostly. And
yeah, you can break the tip off, though, and then they just reprofile it down to a shorter dagger.
But yeah, well, the history, I mean, we could talk for hours about the history of edged weapons, but
that would be better with Scout. Scout is a bigger knife guy, and I think Joe Dolio, too, is a bigger knife guy than I am. I like them. I'm just... Those two have so much more knowledge on the knife spectrum than I do. I did want to go kind of roll back to the NVIS thing, and what the NVIS does for the prepper versus... And I hate to hit the Meshtastic up. I kind of didn't want to because you guys kind of did a good job.
No, don't worry about it. Let's focus on what NVIS is and what NVIS does.
Well, yeah, but I wanted to bring that up because all the preppers that are looking at Meshtastic right now are looking to make a network in a certain range, 20, 40, 60, 70 miles, and they're using a linked system. It can go down. The nice thing about the NVIS system is you get the same range, if not more, that most people are using it for in 2 radios. So if whoever you want to communicate has that radio, they're covering that whole expanse without having to put more assets in the field that are not necessary for even disaster relief.
I agree.
And you guys kind of touched on that.
I mean, the reality is that NVIS, as you pointed out, requires a radio on the transmit end and a radio on the receive end. And it requires relatively simple, low altitude antennas. So you don't need a lot of equipment. You don't need any infrastructure. You simply need to understand what the ionosphere is doing and what the different layers of or regions of the ionosphere are doing at a particular time of day, at a particular point in the sunspot cycle, wherever you happen to be. And that really, boiled down, is the essence of good NVIS communication. And when you know what you're doing, you have virtually a 100% chance of getting your communication through. The only exception to that is if there is a solar storm or a solar flare, then you may have to wait a few hours in order to get your message through. But NBIS is about as close to 100% comm capable as any mode out there is, with a significantly smaller investment in equipment and infrastructure. There's essentially no infrastructure apart from what one person can easily carry.
Yep, especially nowadays with the radios being
Oh,
the size
yeah.
they are. Even the G90 being quote unquote the big one of the I'd call budget radios, and I called it the Hilux of HF radios
It
because it
really
really is.
is.
They're pretty bomb proof.
They're
You don't have to carry a spare battery with some of these radios, but I always do. But the footprint in it is really
yeah.
small.
I mean, my preferred radio is the TX500, and that radio sips power.
It's the size of an old CB handheld back in the day, or the walkie-talkies that people used in the government in the 80s. They're the big blocky. It's almost probably about the same size as the old brick cell phones.
It's
back in the
smaller
day.
than some of that stuff. It is very, very, very compact. It's an HF only radio. Well, HF in 6 meters. So I guess technically it's VHF, but it's essentially an HF radio. It is about as close to waterproof as any radio I've seen. It is certainly very highly water resistant. I've had it out in downpours and everything else and never had a problem with it. And I've run it for an entire weekend, pretty much continuously, on one 4.5 amp hour battery.
Yep.
So
it just sips power. And some of these other radios sip a little more power. That's the problem with them.
You know, I mean, the Loud 599, when I got it, was a $1,000 radio, and I think it probably still is.
Yep. Oh, it's I think 1,300 right now because I've looked at them.
Okay.
Several times because I like yours.
Well, it is not an inexpensive radio, and you know, I wanted something that was as close to waterproof as I could get, and something that was very easy on power. Because, you know, if you are in a situation where you need to use HF over a relatively extended period of time, then you're going to have a way to recharge your batteries. And to your point earlier, I carry at least 2 batteries with me.
Yep.
And
I try to do the same.
That way I have one that I'm using and one that I can charge. And one of the nice things about the lithium ferrophosphate battery chemistry, which is what I use, is that it really doesn't matter to the battery whether it's fully charged, you know, or whether it's mostly discharged. The power delivery curve for those batteries in that chemistry is very flat. And unless you keep track of, you know, how much power you've put in and taken out, it's going to be very difficult for you to know when the battery runs out until it runs out. So, you know, and that engenders some other equipment requirements, which are not really onerous, but, you know, you definitely have to think about it ahead of time. But anyway, you know, going back to our muttons here, you don't have to have a TX500 to do what you need to do. You can do it with a G90, which is what, maybe these days, what, a $450 radio?
I bought mine used for $450, and I think it's $450 for right now for a new one. Oh, by the way, the Lab 559 is $1,099 right now on Ham Radio Outlet. The MP series, the newer one, is $1,399, so $1,400.
Yeah, I've looked at that one, and I wasn't
quite. I misquoted a bit.
That's fine. I've looked at the newer one, and I think I understand why the Russian army, why Lab 599 wanted to make those changes. I get it. But I think the original is probably still better than the newer one.
Yes.
Everyone that I know that has purchased one has told me that they like the old one better. And I have used them, not extensively, but on various portable outings with friends who have them. And, you know, I don't think it's as good an HF radio for portable operation as the original was. I mean, that one has its drawbacks, but it really, what it does very well. So, but again, the G90 does a very similar job for, 4/10 the price.
Yep. And I can tell you right now, you don't need all the power that's coming out of the G90. G90's got 20 watts of power, and it does a good job. But we've taken that class, and when I was at your class, we did a half a watt
Yep.
on my radio and got clear communications. So
You can do it. I mean, you do not need, if you have the right antenna at the right height, on the right frequency, at the right time of day, you can make voice communications from point to point with a watt or less of RF. And we have done that consistently in every single class that I've taught.
And I want to bring up something else. For those guys who are in non-pervasive environments and everything else, if you track digital communications and all the stuff, if you read the book called Red November that historians brought up before, they talk about tracking people down, especially HF too. NVIS makes it very, 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 very difficult to track down your location. And that's something that could be important to everybody from warfighters to people in Cuba trying not to be snatched up by specific. And you do in class explain how to do that in a even better way to mitigate a lot of your footprint alone, not only from using less power, but positioning stuff and how to set up your antenna and the drawbacks and the features of certain antennas that make it even better for you to operate.
Wait a minute. I was on mute. Sorry. Yes,
You're good.
we talk about signal intelligence countermeasures. We talk about what history has to teach us. I mean, the capabilities that were available to major combatants in World War II are sobering even today. And when you consider the capability that's available from just commercial off-the-shelf equipment, duplicating the performance of the Abwehr or the British signal intelligence, or for that matter, 1960s American signal intelligence, you can duplicate that capability right now today with relatively inexpensive off-the-shelf equipment.
Yep, and the software is more available than it ever has been to do that stuff. One of the guys now, there's a thing called a real-time digital signal analyzer for radio signals on GitHub, and it looks like some of the military software for free. Just pick it up. You can get on Linux, Mac OS, and everything else.
Yep. No, there's always something new under the sun. And the conflict in the Ukraine has definitely driven a lot of evolution on the signal intelligence front, both for line of sight comms and for potentially HF communication as well. A lot of these drones, I remember seeing a photograph not that long ago of a battlefield that looked like a giant spider had been busy, because a lot of the drones apparently these days now, in order to avoid being located and their control stations being located, are using fiber optic reels, and they are controlling the drone using fiber optics.
They're using a lot of stuff now. They're using a coiled antenna, which I'll show you in class.
The helical?
I've been tracking a lot of it. Yeah, it's a coiled wire. It's something you could build, and they do it with 3D printing to get a proper length on everything. It's interesting.
Yeah, helical antennas were invented by John Krause, WHAK. And John Krause is probably most famous back in the late 30s into the 1950s for the WHAK antenna, which is a wire beam antenna that you can easily build. And it's very effective, and it works really well. It's also in another form the same as the Adcock antenna. So, there's very little that's new under the sun, but the helical antenna has been around a while. And
I think a lot of...
Go ahead.
I think a lot of the technology is a repeat offender. It's just getting a little bit better. The software is getting better. The skills with it are getting a little bit better, and people are relearning old
Yes.
technology, especially in the warfare thing. I wrote 6 articles on drone warfare, and half of them were like how to hide from aerial bombing from World War II technology, updated for modern stuff. But it's the same thing. I just posted earlier today on X a video of a Ukrainian anti-air gun truck being hit, and the author of it tracks all this stuff, but he's like, "Hey, you still need to camouflage even deep in Ukraine." And I'm like, "Yep, absolutely." And here's the article that we wrote about.
Yep. Yeah, I
So
mean,
everything's new, but everything's the same in a
yeah,
lot
I
of
mean,
ways.
new applications for old technology are not at all
Yep.
unusual. And, the H-Adcock array, which has been around, which has been patented, was first patented, I think, in 1919, and has been around for over 100 years, is still today one of the primary ways in which modern electronic direction finding, especially for line of sight, VHF and UHF,
Mhm.
is carried out, is with the use of Adcock arrays. And those have been around for over 100 years.
And I see Yagi antennas more and more in Ukraine. Granted, they're working in the gigahertz frequencies now, and you can see a lot of stuff if you pay attention to all the drone technology. All the antennas you see are the same ones that you're going to be seeing in scouts courses and historians courses in a variation of
Yep.
those antennas.
Yeah, there are only so
So,
many ways to put an antenna together, and I think there are about six major ways to do it, you know. And we talk a little bit about that too. But for purposes of portable operation for portable NVIS operation, especially in a non-permissive environment, there are optimal ways to use those antennas, and there are suboptimal ways. And I talk about the
mhm.
optimal solutions and why I think they are optimal. And I also talk about why some of these other antenna types are not optimal and they come with drawbacks. Now, I'm going to repeat something I said the other night on Scout's podcast, which is there's rule number 1 of antennas. And rule 1 of antennas says that any antenna is better than no antenna.
Yeah. There's a YouTube video out there of a guy attaching, I think it's an ICOM 705. It's the reason why I hit him. And he's using the ICOMs, and he's tuned up guardrails.
Oh, yeah.
He tuned up a dumpster,
Oh, yeah.
steel dumpster, and made HF contacts on it. Tuned up a cattle gate somewhere. And he's just making the point. And he's like, and this is a guy who's running 20 watts maybe on a HF radio making contacts. So have an antenna, and anything can be an antenna, but there are drawbacks, and that's something we go
Oh,
through in
yeah.
class. And what are the drawbacks? How do we make it better? It's the same thing, like Scout sells stubby antennas for VHF, UHF radios because it kind of depresses your footprint on your RF spectrum. It's harder to hear you. And that may be good when you're talking to somebody nearby that you don't want to shout to. But you also don't want to have a spectrum footprint that everybody can see.
Yeah. Well, I demonstrated to one of my buddies how far away I could detect his Bluetooth, and he was absolutely amazed at how easy it was to DF Bluetooth.
We need a whole time. You need to make a class for that stuff.
Yeah, well, Scout and I have been talking about, next level signal intelligence. And we're going to, in the
Yep.
advanced NVIS class, which I'm hoping to have ready to go by the end of this year, early next year, the advanced NVIS class, we're going to cover things like signal intelligence and signal counterintelligence in a lot more depth.
Mhm. Yeah.
And to talk about how you can evaluate your own gear and your own setup and do a SIGINT evaluation to see how easy it's going to be to locate you.
Yep.
And those are some things that we're going to talk about in the advanced class, but that's down the road. You're going to get some exposure to and some understanding of what some of the threats are and how to protect yourself against them. And that is something I cover.
Speaking of which, I need to get that 80-meter fox hunting kit one of these days.
Yeah, 80-meter fox hunting is a big thing in Europe. It's not a big thing here in the U.S.
I'm shocked it isn't over here. Yeah. Yeah, I looked all over for that when we talked about it, and I just... Yeah, it's hard to find.
There's only so many hours in the week, right? There's 168 hours in the week, right? And
Yeah.
you need 80 of them for sleep. Well, old men like me need 80 of them for sleep. And then, there's maintenance and there's, your daily
work and everything else.
A job takes at least 40 hours plus your commute, which in my case is more like 60 hours, so there's that. There's only so much time. So don't be too hard on yourself, okay?
Oh, I'm not. It's just I'm more thinking about where do I put another item in my small domicile versus.
Well, the thing is,
we're already overburdened.
If you have a compact radio like a 705 or the old Yaesu FT817, 6100, G90, yep. If it receives on 80 meters and it runs off of batteries, you can put that in a bag and you can homebrew a directional antenna that will allow you to do 80-meter direction finding. And, it's not all that difficult to do. And that's part of what we're going to be doing in the advanced class. Instead of building a transmit and receive antenna, I think we're going to be building a direction finding antenna for 80 meters so that you will be able to DF your own station or one of your buddy's stations and see how far away you can detect it. So that's one of the things that I'm still working out the
I can't wait for that class. I love that I'm always out of my depth around you, and you've probably forgotten more stuff about HF than I've learned, which is a good sign. I think Scout feels the same way. From his conversation and our conversation about you, before I even met you, I knew who you were because Scout watched me run my 705 in the class.
Well,
so you were a name before you were a teacher.
You're going to make my headphones not fit anymore if you keep that up.
Well, I mean, there's a reason.
Yeah, but I think, and this gets into something that Scout and I talked about at some length a couple days ago. But there is currency, there is money, and there is wealth. And currency is not money, and money is not wealth. True wealth is the ability to add value to whatever it is you're doing. And if you can add value, then you can create wealth and become a wealthy person. And one of the nice things about having skills and knowledge and experience is that it's very difficult to take that from you. People can steal your personal property. People can steal your currency. The government can debase your money. There's all kinds of bad things that can happen. But skills, as long as you're compos mentis and alive, skills are wealth that will pay off for you throughout your entire life.
And I think a lot of this too on that side is so much of our skills have been lost to time, and people are having to relearn this stuff. You are giving a class that would have probably been basic core class in World War II that now is becoming fashionable again because people like satellites can be shot out of the sky. The jamming in Iran right now is off the chart. And we saw that when they snatched Maduro out of his country. And those countries are probably now looking at HF more than anything. And you can still jam HF. We had Cuba several years ago jamming a whole spectrum. And
not
then,
to very good effect, apparently, from what I've been told.
No, but add to that, the counter jamming efforts of people in the U.S. just to be a shit back to them was pretty
That
epic.
was fun. I'm glad I'm
So
glad I got involved in that.
I'm sorry I missed out on that. I heard about it. I'm like, well, I'm not going to use my radio right now because I just don't want to deal with that. If I had known people were actively messing with them,
Oh, that was
and I've gotten Cuba
oh yeah, and I
contacts,
have
so
too. And I'm very careful not to talk about forbidden topics.
yep,
And a lot of the Cuban amateurs I talk to are probably, just decent guys who are interested
yep,
in the hobby. And most of the ones I've talked to are running older equipment, much
mm-hmm,
older equipment. A lot of them are still running tube rigs. And by the way, I should say I like
yep,
tube rigs and I've got several. But when it comes to portable operation and practicing portable operation, and that's the next thing I want to get into. And then I need to let you get some sleep because we've been at this for a long time. But
yep,
for portable operation, having something that runs easily off a compact, light battery, like a lithium ferrophosphate battery, that's a big plus.
yep.
So that means solid state gear right out the
Oh
gate,
yeah,
right? And having a modern radio that has a pan adapter or some way to see what's going on the band that you're interested in is a huge plus. Having something
yep,
that is reprogrammable to deal with design flaws or to give you improvements in design, another huge plus. So
absolutely.
I like my old tube radios, and they have a lot going for them, and they will probably
Yep,
still be functioning after an EMP, even when my
yeah. Mine won't.
unprotected solid state gear gets fried.
Yep,
But, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. And when it
yep.
comes to
Very
portable
true.
operations, having a relatively simple HF radio with, a relatively simple but robust antenna system is really going to stand you in good stead. So there's that. And the other thing I wanted to say is the essence of this is practice. You need to learn the right way to
Mm-hmm.
do things, and then you need to train as if you are doing this for real when it really matters. And being
Yeah,
able to deploy your equipment and get yourself on the air in short order, and then get yourself off the air and packed up in even shorter order, ready to redeploy later, is going to become an essential skill set. And if I ever
absolutely.
teach, for people who are in the business of doing this, if I ever teach a week-long or 2-week-long class, we're going to be spending hours every day practicing the skills and the techniques that I'll be teaching, because there's just no substitute for having adequate experience. One of the sayings that I remember from one of the guys I used to jump with was that amateurs practice until they get it right. Professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. And
Yep.
so to that end, and I know that Scout and I touched on this a little bit, practicing portable operation through SOTA or POTA is not only fun, but if you do it right, it helps build the skills that you're going to need when communications really is a matter of life and death.
Absolutely. And POTA's a lot easier. SOTA's fun to go up on mountains, but if you can't get up on mountains, you can still hunt and you can go out and transmit. And both tactics are worth their weight in gold if you don't feel like rag chewing and hearing about people's goiters and having a FUD fest. I highly recommend PUTA. I got to the point I didn't want to be on nets anymore because people were talking about cysts and everything else. I'm like, I'll take my medical class with Rabbit and Teddy. I don't need it on the radios. So you know
Oh
exactly what
yeah,
I'm talking about.
and yeah,
If
there's a lot of that out there.
I mean, I get it. It's important to them. It's their life, and that's what rag chewing is about too. And they're talking to their friends, so
Yeah,
it's
well,
important.
then there are ride
So
chews like the one I had with a retired Irish fisherman, and I'm not going to bore you with the whole thing, but one of the things I really remember about that was he said to me, "So, do you drive every day to work?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Oh, that's interesting. How far do you drive?" And I said, "Well, right now I'm driving about 75 miles one way." And there was this pause,
Yep.
and he said, "I'm sorry, do you mean 75 miles in a week?" And I said, "No, I mean 75 miles each way, 5 days a week, about 750 miles in a week."
Yep.
And then there was a much longer pause, and finally he came back and he said, "I have never driven 75 miles in a motor vehicle in me life." And
Yep. Europe's a different
well,
animal.
yeah, and this chap lived at the northern tip of Ireland in a little town called Malin Head, which apparently, at least in the wintertime, does not have a road communication with the rest of Ireland. If you want to get anywhere from Malin Head,
Yeah.
you have to take a boat, and that's what he told me. And that was, I mean, intellectually, I'm aware that not everybody, has a road network connecting them. But the idea of somebody in a first world nation like Ireland not being able to just go wherever he wanted,
Get around.
really, really opened my eyes. And that's one of the really nice things about amateur radio, hobby radio, is that you get a chance to talk to people and really get a very different view of what somebody else's, existence is like. So,
Absolutely.
those are, and a good rag chew, a good conversation, being able to extract information from somebody in a casual conversation is a good skill set to have too. So learning how to converse with people and keep conversation flowing is a valuable skill set. And I know that certain 3-letter agencies actually have formal classes in how to do that. That's how I'm put.
It probably needs to be taught in high school at this point.
I mean, one of the big problems with cell phones, and that's a whole nother hour-long conversation we could have.
That's two or three conversations deep. I think we both need to get rolling here soon.
I agree.
So
anyway, I really appreciate your inviting me on your podcast. Thank you.
Anytime and any topic you want to talk about.
Well, we could talk.
I know we both work.
Maybe next time we can talk about the role of the 22 rimfire.
I would love to do that one, and I'll have a conversation with you on that. I may actually have an article about historical foods for rations too, just for grins from World War I to World War II.
There's all kinds of lessons to be learned.
I did a deep dive in stupidity.
No, that's not stupid. No, it's a great idea. I mean, you can go all the way back to the American Indian and pemmican, but there's all kinds of more modern versions that would be interesting to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
But the 22 rimfire, I mean, I've published articles on American Partisan and Brushbeater about that.
I need to dig up your articles again on that, because I have been looking for your radio stuff, and we have talked about that 22 rimfire. And I have a 22 suppressor now, so that has been fun. And I've got a Mark IV, which I put it on, but it can go on a rifle, and that's kind of my next stage funness that I want to do. But let's not dive into that now.
Leave something for next time, right?
Yep. All right. Well, I appreciate you being here. Anytime you want to talk historian, hit me up, and I think the listeners will enjoy tonight like they always do. Keep your shovel sharp, and please don't be a loot drop. And for this one, I'm going to say, don't keep the mic key.
Yes.
Have a good night.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye.